Welcome, survivors, to a cynically awesome in-depth look at the Kingdom Death Monster Gambler's Chest. As usual with these in-depth looks, I'll be explaining a bit more about what's actually inside the contents of this box. For those of you worried about spoilers, I'm not going to spoil anything that's not within the rulebook itself or that you'll immediately experience once you are introduced to anything in the box. Now, first impressions, there is a lot in this box. It's essentially Kingdom Death 2.0 in the sense of it has another box's worth of content in it. Where, let's say, Kingdom Death Monster is one full game, the Gambler's Chest is also one full game. And then if you look at the Year 1 monster expansions, those are singular expansions. The Gambler's Chest is more than just 1, 2, 3, or 4 expansions. It is really an all-encompassing thing that is almost its own thing that can be played by itself. However, you do need the core box in order to play this. If we look at our rulebook here, it actually introduces us to everything that's in this box. So what we essentially have here are 7 module expansions that you can add to your normal games of Kingdom Death Monster. Or you can use this 8th module here, which is an entirely new campaign. The Dreamkeeper campaign. The Dreamkeeper campaign has all 7 of these modules built into it. It's designed for it. But that's not to say that you can't use these other modules for your People of the Lantern campaign. Some modules may not play nice with, say, People of the Stars or People of the Sun, like the Ark Survivors, but the other modules can fit better. So I'll talk a little bit about each module and what it really brings to your game, and whether or not the Gambler's Chest is something that interests you. In the beginning pages here, we have a quick overview of what each module is, but later on in the book, it'll actually give more details as to what the rules behind each of these modules are. I'm not going to go into the back of the book to show you everything, but I will give you a more detailed explanation than what's here on the brief. But first off, there are a lot of miniatures in this box. The Gambler's Chest core box here is about half or so the size of the original Kingdom Death Monster box. However, it comes with a giant box of miniatures, which is probably 2 to 3 times the size of the one that came in the original Kingdom Death Monster box. If you were to look at this, I actually have my original box here. You see this? This is the original Kingdom Death Monster miniature box. Compare that to the Gambler's Chest version, and that's a sizable difference. So naturally this has all the new narrative sculpts, monsters, monster armors, etc. So what are they? So narrative sculpts are just that. They are cosmetic. You can use them if you want as your own survivors or paint them nicely for dioramas. Do whatever you want with them. They are sculpts like anything else. And in the back here there actually are pictures for what each of the sculpts are. Some of these sculpts are very dynamic, and they have a lot of common armor sets and equipment that players usually build during their normal campaigns of Kingdom Death Monster. So you could use these instead of using the limited sprues that you have in your base game to represent your survivors. That way you get a nicer looking miniature, and you can save those modular unique bits from the base game to create more unique survivors. So feel free to use those however you like. The other thing that's added in this module is a new character card innovation. The character card innovation is an innovation that comes in as an inner shrine consequence. However, you can't add it to your pool of available innovations until you beat the Dreamkeeper campaign. So, after you go through an entire campaign and beat it, what is your reward? Well, the innovation is now in your pool. I'm surprised they didn't use it as a strain milestone. That's a concept that's been introduced, but not used in here. Whatever. Point is, you get the innovation, okay, what does it do? The innovation says you create a character deck. Obviously, in this expansion, they give you plenty of character cards. I'm not going to show you what all of them are exactly, but the idea is you create a deck of at least 24 cards. We have more here, and future expansions will introduce more cards. What you do is every time you create a character, or rather every time you name a character, you draw one of those cards. These cards have bonuses or abilities or impairments, and that character will just have that ability, impairment, bonus, etc. It's just an added thing to have. So I guess it stands to reason why they make you want to go through an entire campaign first before adding it into your collection. Might make initial survivors for new campaigns stronger than they would be otherwise. But the deck isn't all good or bad. The ratio works out like this. For every impairment character card you have in your deck, you are allowed to add 5 ability character cards. So it's 1 to 5. And after you finish creating your deck, you're allowed to put in 1 legendary ability card. So you can really customize your character deck depending on your collection and how many cards eventually come out. Currently, at the time of recording, I believe there's only 1 expansion that offers a character card, and that's alllll. So it is what it is. It's cute. It's not a big deal. It's just an added bonus. The next thing we have are patterns and seed patterns. This is different from what the expansions that came before this introduce. Initially, the expansion that came before this introduced pattern cards, but now we see that the pattern cards that came before are actually seed patterns. Pattern cards are slightly different, but they both work similarly. Seed patterns are something that you get naturally through the course of a campaign. In the Dreamkeepers expansion, I believe Ark Survivors, which is what the survivor in that campaign is called, they have a story event that they trigger when they reach Insight 3, which is similar to the beta rules, but I'll stop referring to the beta rules. I'm just going to talk about what's here in this box. When they reach Insight 3, you can create the seed pattern deck, which is you gather all your cards and you find all the cards that are relevant to your campaign, in the sense of there are generic seed cards that just have the seed keyword, and then there are keywords that pertain to specific monsters. If your campaign has that monster in it, then you're allowed to put in that seed pattern. You could put in a seed pattern of a monster that's not in your campaign, but you could never make it because the monster is required, so there's no point. So just gather all the ones that are relevant for you, and it's now a deck for you to pull from. And whenever a survivor reaches Insight 3, you pull a new card. These new patterns are available for you to create, like anything else, as if, it was at a location. And they offer new items, weapons, gear, etc. But they require different resources, not just the resources for the pattern itself, like, say an axe uses bone, hide, and, monster tooth, whatever. There might be action resources, like the character who's creating it breaks their arm in the process, or something like that, right? There are other consequences to building the pattern than just the resources themselves. Once you build it, it just gear like anything else. There might be some requirements on the items used to create it. There is an era icon here in the top right, which might say era 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. That denotes that if a pattern requires something like a bone, then that means that it requires a bone from a monster resource of that era. So for example, if this Mighty Bone Axe was era 4 and says you need 1 generic bone, you can't use a basic resource bone. You have to use a bone from a monster resource of the 4th era. What the era means is they've changed how they sort of structure, how they're going to talk about campaign structure and monster difficulty in terms of nodes. These nodes are referred to as eras in regards to the pattern rules, but otherwise what it means is if you want to customize your Kingdom Death Monster campaign with all the different expansions that you have, here's a bit of a guideline where you want a Node 1 quarry, Node 2, Node 3, Node 4, Node 1 Nemesis, Node 2 Nemesis, Node 3 Nemesis. And so it's going to start introducing this node reference point in future expansions so that you know how to create a balanced experience rather than just throwing everything into your campaign and just seeing where it goes. So when the pattern says it wants an Era 4 bone, it wants a Node 4 monster, in which case in the current expansion it's either the Dung Beetle Knight, the Lion God, or the King, and that's what's acceptable for use of that bone requirement. Not any other monsters' bones, not a basic resource bone. So that's talking about seed patterns. You get them naturally over the course of a game. Patterns refers to something that you learn how to make after defeating a monster with the Indomitable special trait. It introduces these new Indomitable resources that you get if you defeat that monster. So let's say you fight a white lion that has the Indomitable trait. In this box, there will have been Indomitable resources that you give to different monsters. The Phoenix gets one, I think the white lion gets one. Other monsters get one, not just for the ones available in here, but for the core game itself and other expansions. If such a resource deck exists, you draw one from it in addition to the rewards you get. So let's just pretend you beat a white lion with Indomitable. Let's say it gives you 5 basic, 5 white lion resources, and you get 1 Indomitable resource. You draw the resource, and it'll be a resource like anything else, but at the bottom, it'll say that you discover a new pattern. So let's just pretend, right? So we get the white lion, and we get the white lion special super claw or whatever, right? At the bottom, it says, or at the top it says bone, claw, whatever, and at the bottom it says, discover the white lion super talon pattern. You take that card, the pattern associated with the Indomitable resource, you add it to your settlements, and it just offers a new weapon or gear that you can create. And typically it requires that Indomitable resource in addition to other things. You can create the thing, ooh la la, there you go, Bob's your uncle. That's what the pattern and seed patterns add to your game. It's just more options, more variety of new gear that you can potentially craft if you want to. And because the seed pattern deck is so vast and will be added to with future campaigns and expansions, it means that each run of Kingdom Death Monster will be more unique. Encounters. Now this expansion is a tricky one. Basically, you have hunt events that can get introduced into your generic hunt deck. You know, the one from the base game that just has the generic roll 2 dice, pick a random event scenario. Instead of that, you might find an encounter. An encounter is basically a mini boss fight before you reach your quarry. It has their own special rules depending on the monster, or in this case monsters you're facing, which these are the bone eaters. So you'll have to refer to each encounter specific rules on how you set them up, how you play with them, and what rewards you get from them. Here it introduces one new one, but as the game goes, more encounter expansions may be introduced. And that's all it is just the idea of a fight before your main proper fight. And after you do this fight, options are available to you in terms of how you want to proceed going forward towards your proper quarry. If you suffer a lot of damage fighting this, you may not want to actually go fight your level 3 Phoenix, and instead can fight a weaker version of the quarry you're facing or turn back entirely. That's the idea. So here we have the Scouts of Death. So originally, the Scout of Death was a lore concept. It was the idea of why your character gear came back to the settlements even after all your characters died. That was because the Scout brought the gear and came back. Now the Scout can be played as a playable rule rather than just a concept. Essentially, one of your survivors in the settlement becomes a 5th departing survivor. and that works exactly as you might think it is. It is a 5th survivor for your hunt track. It is a 5th survivor for your fight. But there are some extra rules to it. 1, a new location is introduced for scout gear. 2, the scout must use the scout gear grid, which is a 2x2 as opposed to a 3x3. And the scout has less movement than the other survivors. However, they are the only ones that can equip scout gear, which is built at the scout location. They also introduce a generic hunt card that goes and swaps out one of your generic hunt events. And in here, there are scout events for when you pull the scout card. And it works exactly like the regular hunt events, the randomized hunt events in the base game. Roll the dice, see the events, read the text, do the thing. They also have a different mechanic where in the base game, whenever you defeated a level 3 monster, you got certain rewards. Here, the scout can make observations when you fight tougher monsters and does a similar thing, but again, I'm not going to go too far into it. But there are discovery cards that are only introduced thanks to the scout, because the scout is essentially watching the fight, and they can either participate if they want, or they can stay back. You know, they are a hunter just like anyone else, or rather, they are a survivor just like anyone else. So you may or may not want them to participate or protect them, because if everyone else dies, it's the scout's responsibility to take all the gear and bring it back home. And if they die, then you don't get to do that. Wanderers is kind of a new type of event. They come with a little booklet, and they introduce a new kind of event where a wanderer can come into your settlements and they do stuff depending on their booklet. They introduce knowledges, which we'll get into when we talk about Ark Survivors, because Ark Survivors is a core concept to how survivors play the game. You know, where the People of the Stars campaign, the core concept was around these stars and constellations, and everything about how that campaign works is focused around getting those marks so that you can get this constellation, so that events and things can happen the way they need to happen. Here, knowledge is the core concept. And the Wanderer is just an addition to that. So we've got new monsters. We've got the Crimson Crocodile. We've got the Smog Singers, which, if you notice, is 3 smaller monsters as opposed to 1 large one. We've got Atlas, the Child Eater. We've got the Gambler with his big ball of people. We've got the King, and we've got the God Hand. These are all new monsters introduced into the campaign. You can add these, of course, into any other campaign, but the Dream Keepers has all of these built into it. And naturally, these monsters come with their own armor sets, events, locations if required, and unique rules to them. So when fighting those monsters, read up on their new rules, understand how they work, and have fun. Try not to die. Ark Survivors. Okay, this is the big one. Essentially, you're going to need 3 decks, which of course they bring into this game. You need your knowledge cards, which essentially are like fighting arts, but they're not specific to fighting per se. They are just bonus abilities, okay? You get those knowledge cards based on the philosophy of the survivor. You get a philosophy by going through the collective cognition reward cards, which you get. So, okay, there's a lot going on here. There is a lot. When you finish your first day, all of this stuff gets introduced, and it is a lot to set up and go through your first time going. But let me try and explain how it works. Collective cognition. This is a new XP track, essentially, for your settlement. Your survivors get XP based on the monsters they kill. For example, beating the prologue gives you 1 XP. Beating a level 1 monster for the first time gives you 1 XP, or in this case, 1 CC. I'm going to start using CC as the XP interchangeable word here. So you get 1 CC for beating a level 1 monster. You get 2 CC for beating a level 2 monster the first and second time. You get 3 CC for beating a level 3 monster for the first, second, and third time. So keep that all in mind. All right. So essentially you're building up your CC bar, and as you hit certain milestones, you'll draw the card with the amount that you have. So the CC deck doesn't go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It goes from 1 to 2 to 6 to 8 to 11, whatever it is, right? And you draw the card and you get the bonuses thereof. The first bonus you'll get is to create your philosophy cards. So there are a handful of philosophy cards. Let's pretend that there's 10. Of those 10 cards, they have different values. There are starting philosophy cards, core philosophy cards, level 1 philosophy cards, level 2 philosophy cards, there might be level 3, so on, right? When you start the game, when you start a campaign rather, you get a starting philosophy, a core philosophy, and 2 tier 1 philosophy cards. Your starting philosophy will always be a starting philosophy. Your core philosophy is based off of your campaign. So the Dreamkeeper campaign has Dreamism as its core philosophy, and then you get 2 generic ones. If your campaign does not have a core philosophy, for example, the People of the Lantern campaign doesn't have one, you instead get 3 tier 1 philosophies. Shuffle all these, put the starting philosophy on top, and whenever a character reaches their first hunt milestone at 2 XP, they will draw a philosophy card. Upon drawing it, they will adopt that philosophy. Survivalism is the starting philosophy in the game so far. So what you do is you'll find the booklet for your new philosophy, and you will turn to the first page, follow all the instructions, and again, this isn't spoiler, this happens after the first day. You will see this after the first day, and it's going to be a lot to take in, so I'm giving you a small introduction to it now so you know what to expect. You look at this, and what it's going to do is give you a bonus and a detriment. All philosophies do that. Not only that, it'll determine your new hunt XP track. Ark Survivors don't have all their boxes listed out on their hunt XP. Your philosophy will determine where you get your milestones. Here you see that you get one after every other, and then after every 2, and then that's it. Some might be front-loaded, back-loaded, sparsed out differently. It depends. We don't know, right? Each philosophy is different. And each bonus and each detriment is different. But these philosophies give your survivors access to knowledge cards. For example, survivalism here, its knowledge or tenet is tenacity. A tenet is a knowledge card that you cannot lose. If a survivor adopts a philosophy, they will always have that tenet. For example, survivalism is tenacity. They cannot lose it. Whereas in other campaigns, your fighting arts, you could have 3, but anytime you got another one, you could replace any one of the 3. Here you still have a maximum of 3 knowledges in addition to your fighting arts, but if you get a new knowledge, you can replace one of your knowledges that is not your tenet. So what are knowledges? They're like fighting arts, they give you bonuses, and they can be upgraded. So the way that they get upgraded is based off of their observations that's specific to them. A knowledge card will have its bonus at the top. Let's just say, for example, it's like +1 strength. Cool, awesome. And then it has an observation, which says anytime you do a wound, you get +1 observation. And then it'll have at the bottom a number of checkboxes showing how many observations you need to do in order for that knowledge card to be upgraded. And again, I'm just using examples here. Just making up examples. If your ability is +1 knowledge, and your observation is every time you wound the monster per attack, and then the bottom one is wound the monster 3 times. So you do it, boom, then your knowledge upgrades immediately to the next one. So if it was, let's say, Mighty Strength 1, it then becomes Mighty Strength 2. And let's just say that it's you get +1 strength and you get +1 strength token at the start of every showdown, right? Okay, cool. And then its new observation is spend a token to do a thing, whatever, I don't know. Whatever it says. You can upgrade these knowledges, and all these knowledges that you require go into a knowledge deck. So then these knowledges become available for all survivors to potentially pull from. And survivors will only get the best knowledge variants you have currently unlocked. So for example, let's say I have my tenacity at level 3, and then a new survivor comes up and they're a brand new baby and they get to draw a knowledge card, and I happen to draw tenacity. They will get tenacity 3, not 1, not 2. They will get tenacity 3. So you want to upgrade all these knowledge cards as much as possible so that you can pass them on to all your other survivors. There will be a location called the Forum that's introduced into your campaign, and that'll help you kind of spread your knowledge around the way you want it amongst your survivors. Knowledge cards not only can be drawn from randomly, but you can essentially buy them at the Forum so that you can really create the ideal survivor that you're looking for with all the knowledges that you want, unlike fighting arts, which you get totally randomly. Here it offers a bit more customization to how you create your characters or how you build them. So that's really cool. You can get knowledge cards in many different ways, so that's why the Forum and expanding your knowledge cards will introduce new philosophies into your game, which you want for the rest of your survivors, so that they can benefit from going through these booklets and seeing what they have to offer. As you upgrade your knowledge cards, your philosophies also get upgraded. They go from rank 1 to 2, and all these bonuses happen. There's a lot here. Ark Survivors by itself is a huge content expansion, which is why it doesn't play nice with People with the Stars or People with the Sun. But if you want to do People with the Lantern with Ark Survivors, okay, yeah, go for it. But it's a lot. Most of these modules can be introduced to ongoing campaigns, but Ark Survivors, you really have to start with this. And like I said, after that first day, all of this gets introduced to you, and it's a lot to go through. But it's super worth it. It's super cool. You know, seeing these knowledge cards and being excited at what the possible futures are for them and how they expand. Like, they're not just singular trees that go up linearly. Philosophies have multiple knowledge cards which have multiple different expansions, and I can only imagine that they branch off into different knowledge cards and Wanderers, adding a new layer to that. It's a lot. So, collective cognition, fight unique monsters, get unique rewards, introduces philosophies, which bring you new knowledge cards, which get upgraded and can be shared amongst your survivors. Super cool, super interesting. I am excited to see it all unfold before my very campaign. And then we have the Dreamkeeper campaign, which brings everything that we talked about into one campaign, has its unique timeline track with its unique events, introducing all these new monsters, new nemesises, new nemesi, whatever the word is, so on and so forth, new locations, new innovations, but it's not that simple. The Dreamkeeper campaign was really designed to be just Dreamkeeper plus core box. So if you're like me and you have all the year 1 expansions, you have to take everything that's a year 1 expansion out, essentially. So all the newly added disorders, fighting arts, innovations, etc., you take all of those out and you just add core box and gambler's chest to create the Dreamkeeper campaign collection. And they have it here in this box. They give you dividers so that you can take your stuff from the core box and just put it in here. All your disorders, put them in here. All your innovations, put them in here. Your terrain cards, put them in here. It really wants you to just play Gambler's Chest and core box. So if you're out there thinking, oh, you know, Gambler's Chest, I really want to try that, but like, that's all I have. I only have the core box. Is that okay? That's perfect. That's all you need. You don't need any other expansion. And in fact, the Dreamkeeper campaign does not want you to add any other expansion into this game. So they really want a pure experience here. And the Dreamkeeper campaign starts with the prologue, just like the People of the Lantern, just like People of the Stars, People of the Sun, and you fight the Crimson Crocodile. It gets you started here fighting the Crimson Crocodile, and then you just go. After you beat him, you of course do everything like you would in a normal campaign and follow the order of events based on your timeline. You start with your first day, which is of course unique to the Gambler's Chest, and then you build your innovation deck, you build your knowledge deck, and you introduce the scouts on your first day. After that is kind of how the rest of it, the People of the Lantern goes. You get introduced to new monsters, you get introduced to new innovations at certain points, you get introduced to your nemesis, and they kick your ass, etc., etc., etc. And it has its own milestones, similar to People of the Lantern and all the others. When you all die, 15, first child, first time death count is updated, and here you go, first survivor to reach 3 understanding. That introduces your patterns and so forth. And it has a new sideboard here to put your knowledge, philosophies, collective cognition. But that's everything, I think. There are a little bit more details that talk about Ark Survivors. There's a new resource, or rather a new stat called Systemic Pressure, Torment, and Lumi. I'm not going to get into all that. They're pretty simple though, but just in a generic sense, there's a lot here. And I think, you know, you might want to look at this and be like, okay, that's a lot. Maybe I will just introduce these things slowly. And to that, I say, hey, if you already know how to play Kingdom Death Monster, just go for it. Go for the Dreamkeeper campaign. But if you are new to Kingdom Death Monster, don't do this. Play the People of the Lantern campaign. Go through that. Try that a few times. Beat it. If you can beat it, then you can probably do this. If you just so happen to not have the 1.6 upgrade pack, this will also bring you some cards to get you up to speed with 1.6. But that's also an interesting thing here. As much as this game updates, it says that it adds new core rules to the game. It doesn't. It adds new core concepts to the idea that, hey, maybe future expansions might make use of this, but there's nothing in here that like changes fundamentally how Kingdom Death Monster works at its core. Dice is still used the same way. Hunt experience still works the same way. Combat mechanics still work exactly the same way. Nothing in here changes how I fight a white lion or a screaming antelope or whatever. The core concepts that it introduces are for the monsters that appear in here. And maybe future monsters will use those core concepts, but as it currently stands, they don't. So you don't have to worry so much about these new core rules, because they will only be relevant to the monsters in here. So you're not missing out if you don't have this to add to your core game. Continue to play People of the Lantern. Beat 1.6 if you can. And once you do that, and once you feel like, you know what, I love Kingdom Death Monster, I want more, then go into the Gambler's Chest. Because it's essentially a new Kingdom Death Monster box. It's not just a small remix to a campaign like People of the Stars and People of the Sun. It is a whole new campaign. It is a whole new campaign's worth of content. So be ready for it if you want to tackle it on. I know I've been away for a bit, but this time I have a very good reason. I bought a house. So that means I now have the comfort and privacy to be able to record whenever I want. Because before I used to live in a condo, and condos suck because you share walls, and when your neighbors suck, you hear what's going on in their house, and it determines whether or not you can record whenever you want to. So that is no longer a problem for me. I can do this whenever I want, and my setup is all set up. So if you're excited to see Kingdom Death Monsters Gambler's Chest played out, I am ready for it. I just got to put together all the miniatures as I need them and paint them so that they're ready for this monster of a time. But that's all for now. The final word, do I recommend the Gambler's Chest? I do. That's a lot to unpack, but I am so excited to see where it goes. Encounters, I'm less jazzed about. Scouts, I'm less jazzed about. Patterns, it's alright. It's new. It's something else. And then character innovation, I mean, I won't get that until I beat the Dreamkeeper, so I can't really make a comment on that. But Ark Survivors, Dreamkeeper campaign, monsters, that's what I want. And that's what's here. Okay. I want to thank everyone for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and leave a comment and tell me what you're excited to see. But that is all for now. Thank you so much for watching.